Marley was dead. There is no doubt about that. The register of his burial was signed by the clergyman, the clerk, the undertaker, and the chief mourner. Scrooge signed it. Scrooge and he were partners for many years. Scrooge was his sole executor, his sole administrator, his sole friend, and sole mourner. Oh, but Scrooge was tight-fisted, secret, and solitary as an oyster. Nobody ever stopped him on the street to say, "My dear Scrooge, how are you? When will you come to see me?" No beggars asked him for money. No children asked him what time it was. No man or woman ever once in his life inquired the way to such and such a place. No one asked Scrooge for anything. But what did Scrooge care? It was the very thing he liked, to keep all human sympathy at a distance. Once upon a time, of all the good days in the year, on Christmas Eve, old Scrooge sat busy at his counting-house. It was cold, bleak, biting weather. The city clocks had only just gone 3, but it was quite dark already. It had not been light all day. Candles were burning in the windows of the neighboring offices. The fog was so dense outside that the houses opposite were mere phantoms. The door of Scrooge's counting-house was open, so that he might keep his eye upon his clerk. The clerk sat in a dismal little room copying letters. Scrooge had a very small fire, but the clerk's fire was so very much smaller that it looked like one piece of coal. Scrooge kept the coal box in his own room.
"A Merry Christmas, Uncle. God save you,"
cried a cheerful voice. It was the voice of Scrooge's nephew.
"Bah, humbug!"
Scrooge's nephew Fred had been walking rapidly in the fog and frost. His face was glowing. His eyes sparkled.
"Christmas a humbug, Uncle? You don't mean that, I'm sure."
"I do mean it. Merry Christmas. What right have you to be merry? What reason have you to be merry? You're poor enough."
"Come, then. What right have you to be dismal? What reason have you to be miserable? You're rich enough."
"Bah!
"Don't be cross, Uncle."
Merry Christmas. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money, a time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer, a time for balancing your books?"
"Uncle."
"Nephew, keep Christmas in your own way, and let me keep it in mine."
"Keep it, but you don't keep it."
"Let me leave it alone, then. Much good may it do you. Much good it has ever done you."
"I have always thought of Christmas time as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. It's the only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women open their hearts freely. And therefore, Uncle, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe that it has done me good and will do me good. And I say, God bless it."
The clerk involuntarily applauded.
"Let me hear another sound from you, and you'll keep your Christmas by losing your position."
"Don't be angry, Uncle. Come, dine with us tomorrow."
"No."
"But why? Why?"
"Why did you get married?"
"Because I fell in love."
"Because you fell in love. Good afternoon."
"But, Uncle, you never came to see me before I got married. Why give it as a reason for not coming now?"
"Good afternoon."
"I want nothing from you. I ask nothing of you. Why cannot we be friends?"
"Good afternoon."
"I am sorry with all my heart to find you so resolute, but I'll keep my Christmas humor to the last. So a Merry Christmas, Uncle, and a Happy New Year."
"Good afternoon."
His nephew left the room. He stopped at the door to wish a Merry Christmas to the clerk, who, cold as he was warmer than Scrooge, for he returned the Christmas greetings cordially.
"There's another fellow, my clerk with 15 shillings a week and a wife and family, talking about a Merry Christmas."
As the clerk let Scrooge's nephew out, he let 2 other people in.
"Scrooge and Marley's, I believe. Have I the pleasure of addressing Mr. Scrooge or Mr. Marley?
Mr. Marley has been dead these 7 years. He died 7 years ago this very night.
At this festive season of the year, Mr. Scrooge, it is more than usually desirable that we should make some slight provision for the poor and destitute, who suffer greatly at the present time.
Many thousands are in want of common necessities. Hundreds of thousands are in want of common comforts, sir.
Are there no prisons?
Plenty of prisons.
And the workhouses, are they still in operation?
They are, still. I wish I could say they were not.
The treadmill and the poor law are in full vigour, then?
Both very busy, sir.
Oh, I was afraid from what you said at first that something had occurred to stop them. I'm very glad to hear it.
A few of us are trying to raise funds to buy the poor some meat and drink, and means of warmth. We choose this time because it is a time, of all others, when want is keenly felt, and abundance rejoices. What shall I put you down for?
Nothing.
You wish to be anonymous?
I wish to be left alone. Since you ask me what I wish, gentlemen, that is my answer. I don't make merry myself at Christmas, and I can't afford to make idle people merry. I help to support the prisons and workhouses. They cost enough, and those who are badly off must go there.
Many can't go there, and many would rather die.
If they would rather die, they had better do it, and decrease the surplus population. It's enough for a man to understand his own business, and not to interfere with other people's. My business occupies me constantly. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Seeing clearly that it would be useless to pursue their point, the gentlemen left. Meanwhile, the fog and darkness thickened, and the cold became intense. At length, the hour of closing the counting-house arrived. With an ill will, Scrooge got off his stool. The clerk put on his hat.
You'll want all day tomorrow, I suppose.
If convenient, sir.
It's not convenient, and it's not fair. If I was to stop half a crown for it, you'd think yourself ill-used, and yet you don't think me ill-used when I pay a day's wages for no work.
It is only once a year, sir.
A poor excuse for picking a man's pocket every 25th of December. I suppose you must have the whole day. Be here all the earlier next morning.
The clerk promised that he would, and Scrooge walked out with a growl. He took his melancholy dinner in his usual melancholy tavern, and having read all the newspapers and studied his banker's book, he went home to bed. He lived in a gloomy suite of rooms. The house was old and dreary, for nobody lived in it except Scrooge. The other rooms were all lit out as offices. The fog and frost hung about the black old gateway of the house. Now it is a fact that there was nothing at all particular about the knocker on the door, except that it was very large. It is a fact that Scrooge had seen it every night and every morning for many years. It is also a fact that Scrooge had as little imagination as any man in the city of London. Yet on that Christmas Eve, Scrooge saw not a knocker, but Marley's face. Marley's face. It had a dismal light about it. The eyes were wide open and were perfectly motionless. As Scrooge looked fixedly at this phenomenon, it was a knocker again. To say that he was not troubled would be untrue. He took out the key, turned it, walked in, and lighted his candle. Up Scrooge went. Darkness is cheap, and Scrooge liked it. Before he shut his heavy door, He walked through his rooms to see that everything was all right. His memory of the face on the knocker made him want to do that. Quite satisfied, he closed his door and locked himself in. Secured against surprise, he put on his dressing gown, slippers, and nightcap, and sat down before the fire to take his gruel. As he threw his head back in the chair, he glanced up at a disused bell that hung in the room. It was with great astonishment, and with a strange, inexplicable dread, that as he looked, he saw this bell begin to swing. It swung so softly that it scarcely made a sound, but soon it rang out loudly, and so did every bell in the house. This might have lasted half a minute or a minute, but it seemed an hour. The bells stopped as they had begun, together. They were followed by a clanking noise from down below in the cellar, as if someone were dragging a heavy chain. Scrooge then remembered that ghosts in haunted houses were described as dragging chains. The cellar door flew open with a booming sound, and then he heard the noise much louder on the floors below, then coming up the stairs, then coming straight towards his door.
It's humbug still. I won't believe it.
His color changed, though, when, without a pause, it came on through the heavy door and passed into the room before his eyes. It was Marley's ghost. The same face, the very same. Marley. The chain he dragged was fastened about his middle. It was made of cash boxes, keys, and deeds. His body was transparent.
How now? What do you want with me?
Much.
Who are you?
Ask me who I was.
Who were you then?
In life, I was your partner, Jacob Marley.
Mercy! Dreadful apparition, why do you trouble me?
Man of the worldly mind, do you believe in me or not?
I do. I must. But why do spirits walk the earth, and why do they come to me?
It is required of every man that the spirit within him should walk abroad among his fellow men, and travel far and wide. If that spirit does not travel in life, it is condemned to do so after death. It is condemned to wander through the world and witness what it might have shared on earth and might have turned to happiness.
You are chained. Tell me why.
I wear the chain I forged in life. I made it link by link, and I wore it of my own free will. It is a ponderous chain.
Jacob, old Jacob Marley, tell me more. Speak comfort to me, Jacob.
I have no comfort to give. I cannot rest. I cannot stay. I cannot linger anywhere. My spirit never walked beyond our counting house in life. Weary journeys lie before me. No rest, no peace.
But you were always a good man of business, Jacob.
Business! Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the ocean of my business. At At this time of the year, I suffer most. Hear me. My time is nearly gone.
I will, but don't be hard on me, Jacob. Pray.
I am here tonight to warn you that you have yet a chance and hope of escaping my fate, Ebenezer.
You were always a good friend to me, thank ye.
You will be haunted by 3 spirits.
Is that the chance and hope you mentioned, Jacob?
It is.
I think I'd rather not.
Without their visits, you cannot hope to avoid the path I walk. Expect the first tomorrow, when the bell tolls 1.
Couldn't I take 'em all at once and have it over, Jacob?
Expect the second on the next night, at the same hour. The third upon the next night, at the last stroke of 12. And for your own sake, remember what has passed between us.
Scrooge became aware of confused noises in the air. The spectre floated out into the bleak, dark night. Scrooge followed to the window. Desperate in his curiosity, he looked out. The air was filled with phantoms, wandering here and there, and moaning as they went. Every one of them wore chains. The misery with them all was, clearly, that they sought to interfere, for good, in human matters, and had lost the power forever. Scrooge closed the window. From the emotion or fatigues of the day, or his glimpse of the invisible world, or the dull conversation of the ghost, or the lateness of the hour, he was in great need of rest. He went straight to bed, without undressing, and fell asleep instantly. When Scrooge awoke, it was dark. The chimes of a neighboring church began to strike, so he listened for the hour. To his great astonishment, the heavy bell went on from 6 to 7, and from 7 to 8, and up to 12, then stopped.
Why, it isn't possible that I can have slept through a whole day and far into another night.
The idea alarmed him. He scrambled out of bed and went to the window. All he could make out was that it was still very foggy and extremely cold, and that there was no noise of people running on the streets. Scrooge went to bed again and thought. The more he thought, the more perplexed he was, and the more he tried not to think, the more he thought. Was it a dream or not? Scrooge remembered that the ghost had warned him of a visitation when the bell tolled 1. He resolved to lie awake until the hour was past. At last the bell sounded 1. Light flashed up in the room, and the curtains of his bed were opened. Scrooge found himself face to face with an unearthly visitor.
Are you the spirit whose coming was foretold to me?
I am.
Who and what are you?
I am the ghost of Christmas past.
As the words were spoken, they passed through the wall of the house and stood upon an open country road. The fields on either side. The city had vanished, and the darkness and the mist had vanished with it. It was a clear, cold winter day, with snow upon the ground.
Good heaven, I was brought up in this place. I was a boy here.
Let us go on. Do you remember the way?
Remember it. I could walk it blindfold.
They walked along the road. Scrooge recognized every gate and post and tree, until a little market town appeared in the distance, with its bridge, its church, and river. Some ponies now were seen trotting towards them, with boys on their back. All these boys were in great spirits, and shouted to each other, until the fields were full of merry sounds.
These are but shadows of the things that have been. They have no consciousness of us.
The merry riders came on, and as they came, Scrooge knew and named every one of them. Why was he so happy to see them? Why was he filled with gladness when he heard them wish each other Merry Christmas as they parted at the crossroads for their homes? What was Merry Christmas to Scrooge? What good had it ever done to him?
The school is not quite deserted. A solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still.
Scrooge said he knew it, and he sobbed. They left the high road and soon approached the school. They entered the dreary hall, and glancing through the open doors of many rooms, they found them poorly furnished, cold, and vast. In one of these, a lonely boy was reading near a feeble fire. Scrooge wept to see his poor forgotten self as he used to be.
Poor boy. I wish, but it's too late now.
What is the matter?
Nothing. There was a boy singing a Christmas carol at my door last night. I should like to have given him something, that's all.
Let us see another Christmas.
Scrooge's former self grew larger at the words, and the schoolroom became a little darker and dirtier. There he was, alone again, when all the other boys had gone home for their holidays. He was not reading now, but walking up and down despairingly. Scrooge looked at the ghost, and with a mournful shaking of his head, glanced anxiously towards the door. It opened. A little girl, much younger than the boy, came in and put her arms around his neck, often kissing him.
Dear, dear brother, I have come to bring you home, dear brother, to bring you home. Home, home!
Home, little Fan?
Yes, home forever and ever. Father is so much kinder than he used to be. Home is now like heaven. He spoke so gently to me one dear night when I was going to bed. I was not afraid to ask him once more if you might come home. He said, yes, you should, and send me in a coach to bring you. And you are to be a man and are never to come back here. But first, we are to be together all the Christmas long and have the merriest time in all the world.
You're quite a woman, little Fan.
She died a woman and had, as I think, children.
One child.
True, your nephew.
Yes.
They left the school behind them and were now in the busy streets of a city. It was plain enough that here, too, it was Christmas time again. But it was evening, and the streets were lighted up. The ghost stopped at a warehouse door and asked Scrooge if he knew it.
Know it? I was apprenticed here. Why, it's old Fezziwig, bless his heart. It's Fezziwig alive again.
Yo-ho there! Ebenezer! Dick!
Scrooge's former self, now grown a young man, came in, accompanied by his fellow apprentice, Dick.
Dick Wilkins, to be sure. Bless me, yes. There he is. He was very close to me, was Dick. Poor Dick. Dear, dear.
Yo-ho, my boys! No more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick. Christmas, Ebenezer.
In came a fiddler with a music book. In came Mrs. Fezziwig, one vast smile. In came the 3 Miss Fezziwigs, beaming and lovable. In came the 6 young men whose hearts they broke. In came all the young men and women employed in the business. In came the housemaid with her cousin, the baker. In came the cook with the milkman. In they all came, one after another. Away they all went, dancing, 20 couples at once. Old Fezziwig, clapping his hands to stop the dance, cried out, "Well done!" But the fiddler instantly began again. There were more dances, and there was cake, and there was a great piece of cold roast, and there were mince pies and plenty of beer. Then old Fezziwig danced with Mrs. Fezziwig. When the clock struck 11, the ball ended. Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig shook hands with everyone individually as he or she went out, and wished him or her a Merry Christmas. During the whole of this time, Scrooge's heart and soul were in the scene, and with his former self. He remembered everything and enjoyed everything.
A small matter to make these silly folks so full of gratitude.
Small?
Why, is it not? He has spent only a few pounds of your mortal money, 3 or 4 perhaps. Is that so much that he deserves this praise?
It isn't that, Spirit. He has the power to make us happy or unhappy. The happiness he gives is quite as great as if it cost a fortune.
My time grows short. Quick!
Scrooge saw himself again, but older now, a man in the prime of his life. He was not alone, but sat by the side of a fair young girl, in whose eyes there were tears.
Another idol has displaced me. I have seen your nobler aspirations fall off one by one, until the master passion, gain, controls you. Have I not?
I'm not changed towards you, Belle.
Our contract is an old one. It was made when we were both poor, and content to be so, until we could improve our worldly fortune by our patient work. You are changed. When our agreement was made, you were another man.
I was a boy.
Your own feeling tells you that you were not what you are. I am. That which promised happiness when we were one in heart is fraught with misery now that we are two. How often I have thought of this, I will not say. It is enough that I have thought of it, and can release you from your promise of marriage.
Have I ever sought release?
In words, no, never.
In what, then?
In a changed nature, in an altered spirit. May you be happy in the life you have chosen.
Spirit, show me no more. Why do you delight to torture me?
One shadow more.
I don't wish to see it. Show me no more.
But the relentless ghost forced him to observe what happened next. They were in another scene and place, a room, not very large or handsome, but full of comfort. Near the winter fire sat a beautiful young girl, so like Belle that Scrooge believed it was her, until he saw Belle, older now, sitting opposite her daughter. There were more children there. Now a knocking was heard at the door. It was Father come home bringing Christmas toys and presents. Oh, the shouts of wonder and delight with which each package was received. The evening passed. One by one the children and their emotions got out of the parlor and up to the top of the house, where they went to bed. And now Scrooge looked on more attentively than ever as the master of the house sat down with his eldest daughter and his wife Belle at the fireside. His daughter leaned fondly on him. Scrooge's sight grew very dim indeed when he thought that such another creature, quite as graceful and as full of promise, might have called him father, and been a springtime in the haggard winter of his life.
Belle, I saw an old friend of yours this afternoon, Mr. Scrooge. I passed his office window, and as it was not shut up, and he had a candle inside, I could scarcely help seeing him. His partner lies upon the point of death, I hear. There he sat alone, quite alone in the world, I do believe.
Spirit, remove me from this place. I cannot bear it. Take me back. Haunt me no longer.
Scrooge was conscious of being exhausted and overcome by an irresistible drowsiness. He was back in his own bedroom. He barely had time to get into bed before he sank into a heavy sleep. Scrooge awoke and sat up in bed to get his thoughts together. But the bell was again on the stroke of 1. A voice called him by his name.
Ebenezer Scrooge, I am the ghost of Christmas present. Look upon me.
Spirit, take me where you will. I went last night and I learned a lesson which is working now. Tonight, if you have anything to teach me, let me profit by it.
touch my robe.
Scrooge did as he was told and held the robe fast. Suddenly, they were inside Bob Cratchit's four-roomed house. Mrs. Cratchit, dressed poorly, laid the table, assisted by Belinda Cratchit, second of her daughters, while Master Peter Cratchit plunged a fork into the saucepan of potatoes. And now two smaller Cratchits, boy and girl, came tearing in, screaming that outside the baker's they had smelt the goose, and known it for their own. Basking in thoughts of sage and onion, these young Cratchits danced about the table.
Whatever is keeping your precious father, then? And your brother, Tiny Tim? And Martha wasn't as late last Christmas Day.
Here's Martha, Mother!
Here's Martha, Mother! Hurrah! There's such a goose, Martha!
Sit down before the fire, my dear, and have a warm. Lord bless you.
No, no! Here's Father coming!
In came Bob Cratchit with Tiny Tim on his shoulder. Alas for Tiny Tim! He carried a little crutch, and his legs were supported by an iron frame. Martha ran into her father's arms, while the two young Cratchits took Tiny Tim into the kitchen, that he might hear the pudding cooking.
And how did little Tim behave?
As good as gold and better. Somehow he gets thoughtful sitting by himself so much, and thinks the strangest things you ever heard. He told me coming home that he hoped the people saw him in the church because he was a cripple, and it might be pleasant for them on Christmas Day to remember him, who made lame beggars walk and blind men see.
Bob's voice trembled when he told them this. The goose was served. Bob said he didn't believe there ever was such a goose cooked. Its tenderness and flavor, size and cheapness, were the themes of universal admiration. Accompanied by applesauce and mashed potatoes, it was sufficient for the whole family. Everyone had had enough. Now Mrs. Cratchit left the room to bring the pudding in. She entered, flushed but smiling proudly, with the pudding so hard and firm, blazing in ignited brandy, with Christmas holly stuck into the top. Oh, a wonderful pudding! Bob Cratchit said that he regarded it as the greatest success achieved by Mrs. Cratchit since their marriage. At last the dinner was over. All the Cratchit family gathered round the hearth.
A Merry Christmas to us all, my dears. God bless us.
God bless us! God bless us, everyone!
Tiny Tim sat very close to his father's side upon his little stool. Bob held his withered little hand in his, as if he loved the child, and wished to keep him by his side, and dreaded that he might be taken from him.
Spirit, tell me if Tiny Tim will live.
I see a vacant seat in the corner, and a crutch without an owner. If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, the child will die.
No, no, oh no, kind spirit. Say he will be spared.
If these shadows remain unaltered by the future, none other of my race will find Tiny Tim here. What then? If he is to die, he had better do it, and decrease the surplus population.
Scrooge hung his head to hear his own words quoted by the Spirit, and was overcome with penitence and grief.
Mr. Scrooge, I'll give you Mr. Scrooge, the founder of the feast.
The founder of the feast, indeed. I wish I had him here. I'd give him a piece of my mind to feast upon.
My dear, the children, Christmas Day.
It has to be Christmas Day, I am sure, to drink the health of such an odious, stingy, hard, unfeeling man as Mr. Scrooge. You know he is, Robert. Nobody knows it better than you do, poor fellow.
My dear, Christmas Day.
I'll drink his health for your sake, and the day's, not for his. Long life to him, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. He'll be very merry and very happy, I have no doubt.
The children drank the toast after her. Scrooge was the ogre of the family. The mention of his name cast a dark shadow on the party, which was not dispelled for 5 minutes. After the shadow had passed away, they were 10 times merrier than before. And now, without a word of warning from the ghost, they stood in Scrooge's nephew's house.
What place is this?
He said that Christmas was a humbug. He believed it, too.
More shame for him, Fred.
He's a comical old fellow, that's the truth, and not so pleasant as he might be. However, his offenses carry their own punishment, and I have nothing to say against him.
I'm sure he's very rich, Fred. At least you always tell me so.
What of that, my dear? His wealth is of no use to him. He doesn't do any good with it. He doesn't make himself comfortable with it.
I have no patience with him.
Oh, I have. I'm sorry for him. I couldn't be angry with him if I tried. Who suffers by his ill whims? Himself, always. He takes it into his head to dislike us, and he won't come and dine with us. What's the consequence?
Indeed, I think he loses a very good dinner.
I was only going to say that the consequence of his taking a dislike to us is that he loses some pleasant moments, which could do him no harm. I mean to give him the same chance every year, whether he likes it or not, for I pity him.
After tea, they had some music, but they didn't devote the whole evening to music. After a while, they played a game called Yes and No. Scrooge's nephew had to think of something, and the rest had to discover what he was thinking of. He answered only yes or no to their questions. The questions showed that Fred was thinking of an animal, a live animal, a rather savage animal, an animal that growled and grunted sometimes, and talked sometimes, and lived in London. The animal was not a horse, or an ass, or a cow, or a bull, or a tiger, or a dog, or a pig, or a cat, or a bear. At every fresh question that was put to him, the nephew burst into a fresh roar of laughter. At last, Scrooge's niece cried out,
I have found it out. I know what it is, Fred. I know what it is.
What is it?
It's your Uncle Scrooge.
He has given us plenty of merriment, I am sure. It would be ungrateful of us not to drink his health. Here is a glass of mulled wine, and I say, Uncle Scrooge, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to the old man, whatever he is. He wouldn't take it from me, but may he have it nevertheless. Uncle Scrooge.
Uncle Scrooge had become so light of heart that he would have thanked them in an inaudible speech, if the ghost had given him time. But he and the spirit were again on their travels. Much they saw, and far they went, and many homes they visited, but always with a happy end. The spirit stood beside sick beds, and they were cheerful. On foreign lands, and they were close at home. By struggling men, and they were patient in their hope. By poverty, and it was rich. In hospitals and jails, in misery's every refuge, the Spirit left his blessing, and taught Scrooge his precepts. It was a long night, if it were only a night. But Scrooge had his doubts of this.
Forgive me for what I ask, but I see something strange under your skirts. What is it?
From its robe, the Spirit brought two children, wretched, abject, frightful, hideous, miserable. They knelt down at his feet and clung to the outside of its garment.
Oh, man! Look here. Look down here.
They were a boy and a girl, yellow, ragged, sullen, and wolfish. Scrooge started back, appalled.
Spirit, are they yours?
They are man's, and they cling to me, abandoned by their fathers. This boy is ignorance. This girl is want. Beware them both. But most of all, beware this boy. For I see doom written on his brow, unless the writing be erased.
Have they no refuge or resource?
Are there no prisons? Are there no workhouses?
The bell struck 12. Scrooge looked about him for the ghost, and did not see it. At the last stroke he remembered the prediction of old Jacob Marley, and lifting up his eyes saw a solemn phantom coming, like a mist along the ground, towards him. The phantom slowly, gravely, silently approached. When it came near him, Scrooge bent down upon his knee. It was covered in a deep black garment, which concealed its head, its face, its form, and left nothing of it visible save one outstretched hand.
I am in the presence of the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
The spirit did not answer, but pointed onward with its hand.
You are about to show me shadows of the things that have not happened, but will happen in the future. Is that so, Spirit?
The upper part of the garment moved for an instant, as if the spirit had inclined its head. That was the only answer he received.
Ghost of the future, I fear you more than any spectre I have seen. But as I know your purpose is to do me good, and as I hope to live to be a different man from what I was, I'm prepared to keep you company and do it with a thankful heart. Will you not speak to me?
It gave him no reply. The hand was pointed straight before them.
Lead on, Spirit.
The phantom moved away. Scrooge followed in the shadow of its dress, which carried him up and away. There they were in the heart of the city, amongst the merchants, who hurried up and down and chinked the money in their pockets, and conversed in groups, as Scrooge had seen them do so often. The spirit stopped beside two businessmen, observing that the hand was pointed to them. Scrooge advanced to listen to their talk.
No, I don't know much about it either way. I only know he's dead.
When did he die?
Last night, I believe.
What has he done with his money?
I haven't heard. Left it to his company, perhaps. He hasn't left it to me. That's all I know. It's likely to be a very cheap funeral, for upon my life, I don't know of anybody who will go. Suppose we volunteer.
I don't mind going if a lunch is provided.
I'll offer to go, if anyone else will. When I come to think of it, I'm not at all sure that I wasn't his most particular friend, for we used to stop and speak whenever we met. Bye-bye.
The phantom glided on into a street. Its finger pointed to two businessmen talking. Scrooge listened. He knew these men. They were men of business, very wealthy, and of great importance.
Well, Old Scratch has got his own, at last, eh?
So I am told. Cold, isn't it?
Seasonable for Christmas time. You're not a skater, I suppose.
No, something else to think of. Good morning.
Not another word. That was their meeting, their conversation, and their parting. The scene changed, and now Scrooge almost touched a bed, a bare, uncurtained bed, on which beneath a sheet there lay something covered up. The room was very dark. A pale light fell straight upon the bed. On it, unwatched, unkept, uncared for, was the body of a man. He lay in the dark, empty house, with not a man, a woman, or a child to say that he had been kind in this or that. A cat was tearing at the door, and there was a sound of gnawing rats. What they wanted in the room of death, Scrooge did not dare to think.
Spirit, this is a fearful place. Let us go.
The ghost then conducted him through several streets familiar to him. As they went along, Scrooge looked here and there to find himself, but he was nowhere to be seen. They entered poor Bob Cratchit's house, and found the mother and the children seated round the fire. Quiet, very quiet. The noisy little Cratchits were as still as statues in one corner, and sat looking up at Peter, who was reading from a book. The mother and her daughters were sewing, but surely they were very quiet.
And he took a child and set him in the midst of them.
And here's your father at the door. You went to the graveyard today, then, Robert?
Yes, my dear. I wish you could have gone. It would have done you good to see how green a place it is. But you'll see it often. I promised him that I would walk there on a Sunday. My little child. My little child.
They sat around the fire and talked. The girls and mother continued sewing. Bob told them of the extraordinary kindness of Mr. Scrooge's nephew, who had met him in the street that day, and seeing that he looked a little down, inquired what had happened to distress him.
I told him. "I'm heartily sorry for it, Mr. Cratchit," he said, "and heartily sorry for your good wife. If I can be of service to you in any way," he said, giving me his card, "that's where I live. Pray come to me." It really seemed as if he had known our Tiny Tim and felt with us. I am sure we shall none of us forget poor Tiny Tim, shall we?
Never, Father.
And I know, my dears, that when we remember how patient and how mild he was, although he was a little child, we shall not quarrel easily among ourselves and forget poor Tiny Tim.
Never, Father.
I'm very happy. I am very happy.
The ghost of Christmas yet to come conveyed him to a churchyard. Here the wretched man, whose name he had now to learn, lay underneath the ground. The spirit stood among the graves and pointed down to one. Scrooge advanced towards it, trembling.
"Spirit, tell me what man that was who we saw lying dead, before I draw nearer to that stone to which you point. Answer me one question. Are these the shadows of the things that will be, or are they the shadows of things that may be only? Am I that man who lay upon the bed? No, Spirit, oh, no. Spirit, hear me. I am not the man I was. Why show me this if I am past all hope? Good Spirit, assure me that I may yet change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. I will honour Christmas in my heart, and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall live within me. I will not shut out the lesson that they teach. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall be within me. Oh, Jacob Marley, heaven and Christmas time be praised for this. I don't know what to do. I'm as light as a feather. I'm as happy as an angel. I'm as merry as a schoolboy. I'm as giddy as a drunken man. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. I don't know what day of the month it is. I don't know how long I've been among the spirits. I don't know anything. Never mind. I don't care. What's today?
Eh?
What's today, my fine fellow?
Today? Why, Christmas Day.
It's Christmas Day. I haven't missed it. The spirits have done it all in one night. They can do anything they like, of course they can. Hello, my fine fellow.
Hello.
Do you know the butcher's in the next street but one at the corner?
I should hope I did.
An intelligent boy, a remarkable boy. Do you know whether they've sold the prize turkey that was hanging up there?
What, the one as big as me?
What a delightful boy. It's a pleasure to talk to him. Yes, my boy.
It's hanging there now.
Is it? Go and buy it and tell them to bring it here, that I may give them the address where to take it. Come back with the man, and I'll give you a shilling. Come back with him in less than 5 minutes, and I'll give you half a crown.
The boy was off like a shot.
I'll send it to Bob Cratchit's. He won't know who sends it. It's twice the size of Tiny Tim.
The hand in which he wrote the address was not a steady one, but he wrote it somehow. He went downstairs to open the street door, ready for the coming of the butcher's man. As he stood there, the knocker caught his eye.
I shall love that knocker as long as I live. I scarcely ever looked at it before. What an honest expression it has on its face. It's a wonderful knocker. Oh, here's the turkey. Hello, whoop. How are you? Merry Christmas. Why, it's impossible to carry that to Camden Town. You must have a cab.
The chuckle with which he said this, and the chuckle with which he paid for the turkey, and the chuckle with which he paid for the cab, and the chuckle with which he recompensed the boy, were only to be exceeded by the chuckle with which he sat down breathless in his chair again, and chuckled till he cried. He dressed himself all in his best, and at last got out into the streets. The people were by this time filling the streets, as he had seed them with the ghost of Christmas present. Scrooge regarded every one with a delighted smile. He looked so irresistibly pleasant that 3 or 4 good-humored fellows said, "Good morning, sir. A Merry Christmas to you." He had not gone far when, coming towards him, he saw the fat gentleman who had walked into his counting-house the day before, and had said, "Scrooge and Marley's, I believe?"
My dear sir, how do you do? I hope you succeeded yesterday. It was very kind of you. A Merry Christmas to you, sir.
Mr. Scrooge?
Yes, that is my name, and I fear it may not be pleasant to you. Allow me to ask your pardon, and will you have the goodness to accept?
Lord bless me! My dear Mr. Scrooge, are you serious?
If you please, not a penny less. A great many back payments are included in it, I assure you. Will you do me that favour?
My dear sir, I don't know what to say.
Don't say anything, please. Come and see me. Will you come and see me?
I will.
I am much obliged to you. I thank you 50 times. Oh, bless you.
He went to church, and walked about the streets, and patted children on the head, and found that everything could give him pleasure. He had never dreamed that any walk could give him so much happiness. In the afternoon he walked towards his nephew's house. He passed the door a dozen times before he had the courage to go up and knock. But he made a dash and did it.
Why, bless my soul, who's that?
It's I, your Uncle Scrooge. I've come to dinner. Will you let me in, Fred?
Let him in? It is a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. He was at home in 5 minutes. His niece looked just the same. So did everyone when they came. Wonderful party, wonderful games, wonderful happiness. But he was early at the office next morning. Oh, he was early there. If he could only be there first and catch Bob Cratchit coming late. That was the thing he had set his heart upon. And he did it. Yes, he did. The clock struck 9. No Bob. 1:15. No Bob. He was 18.5 minutes late. Scrooge sat with his door wide open, that he might see him come in. Bob's hat was off before he opened the door. He was on his stool in a jiffy, working away with his pen.
Hello. What do you mean by coming here at this time of day?
I'm very sorry, sir. I am late.
You are? Yes, I think you are. Step this way, sir, if you please.
It's only once a year, sir. It shall not be repeated. I was making rather merry yesterday, sir.
Now I'll tell you what, my friend. I am not going to stand this sort of thing any longer. And I am about to raise your salary. A Merry Christmas, Bob. A merrier Christmas, my good fellow, than I have given you for many a year. I'll raise your salary and try to assist your struggling family, and we will discuss your affairs this very afternoon, Bob. Prepare the fires and buy some more coal before you dot another I, Bob Cratchit.
Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. And he had no further encounters with the spirits. And it was always said of him that he knew how to celebrate Christmas better than any man alive. May that be truly said of all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed,
God bless us, everyone.